All right. Hi, everybody. I am Harris Pittman. I just started with Google under Sarah Novotny working on Kubernetes community stuff. Woo! I do not necessarily represent one SIG, but I will be working cross SIGs on many upcoming programs like Awesome Mentoring, this election, and many other things. So just a reminder to please mute when you're speaking. We do have a demo today and a few SIG updates. And demo, first up is Ed Lee. Ed, are you on? Ed, you're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, we dialed in through the phone connection, but I guess it's not working. Okay, good. Okay, so am I up or should I?
Yep, you're up.
Okay, great. Okay, well, thank you for hosting us today, having us as guests. So I just have a couple of slides. Let me share my screen. Clicked on share screen. And do I need to? Oh, wait a minute. Okay, let me make sure you can see other screens too. Okay, good. All right, so just have a couple of slides and then we'll just go straight to the demo. Okay, so today I wanted to tell a little bit about the Argo project. It's basically a project to create kind of container native workflows for Kubernetes. And the goal of the project is to kind of make it easy to use Kubernetes to get work done. So Kubernetes provides orchestration for containers, obviously. And so kind of Argo, the goal is kind of provide kind of like choreography for work that you run in Kubernetes to make it easy for users to submit jobs and to make sure that the your Kubernetes cluster is well fed and tended for. And we have the URLs for our GitHub project and so on, which I'll touch up on a little bit later. So just one second. Okay, next slide. So what is container native workflows, or what does Argo do? Argo is a workflow engine, and where each step in the workflow is a container, which you can define to be whatever you want. It also has included with it integrated artifact management, since oftentimes when you're running a workflow, you're going to generate derived objects or artifacts that will be output by one step, and then you'll want to consume them in another step in order to do additional processing. It also has something called fixtures, which you could think of it as a easy way to spin up services. They're kind of like mini deployments, if you will. So like, for example, you could spin up a MySQL database as a fixture, store data in it, run some tests if you like, and then the fixture will automatically be destroyed when your workflow finishes. So it automatically kind of manages the life cycle of the fixture, make sure that the workflow doesn't start until the fixture is ready, and then destroys the fixture at the end. So that is what we call a dynamic fixture. We also have something called a static or managed fixture, which can be a like a database or something which exists independently of your workflow, but it makes it easy to access those services from. It could even be a SaaS service, doesn't have to be something that you're running, but it makes it easy to access and integrate from your workflows. We also have a Dint or Docker and Docker integrated with the system, because oftentimes we find that when you're using containers to run workflows and so on, you often want to run other containers from that workflow, like to run Docker builds or things like that. So this functionality is, you get it straight out of the box, so you can, without doing anything else, you can immediately start running containers from your containerized workflow. And then we also have an admission control system built into the system, since if you have a lot of users submitting a lot of jobs, and some of those jobs are large parallel jobs, they can overwhelm even the mid or large Kubernetes cluster. And so you don't want too many jobs piling up in the system. It could, in some cases, cause instability if you have a lot of churn in your containers, or if one of the particularly minion nodes go down and come back up, then all of the pods have to be restarted. Okay, so let me take you now to our GitHub project repo quickly to just show you. Basically available under the Argo Proj organization as the Argo repo, Argo Proj Argo. And sorry. There we go. It gives you a brief overview of Argo and then has some simple instructions to get started. Basically, you just need to download the Argo CLI, and then when you run Argo cluster, it will install both a Kubernetes cluster as well as the Argo system on top of the cluster. We're working on a version that'll let you just install Argo on any existing Kubernetes cluster, but today it will create a separate cluster on your AWS account. Okay, so now to the demo. So for the demo, what we've done is we've taken the InfluxDB project and we forked it. And we've added a .argo project directory to it. And within the Argo directory, we've created a couple of YAML files. All of our workflows are specified as YAML. Let's take a look at the YAML to see what it looks like. So here's kind of the high-level workflow. It's called InfluxDB CI. It's a example CI workflow. I use the CI workflow mainly because most people are familiar with how CI works. Although I really think that workflows longer term should really be, it'll probably be used more for things that are not CI, especially by average users. They're useful really to get any kind of work done, to automate jobs and so forth. So we actually expect that a lot of the workflows will be non-CI related. But in this particular one, you can kind of see by the structure that first there's a kind of a description section at the top, and then there's an input-output section. In this particular case, this workflow has no output, so it only has inputs. The two inputs are the commit ID and the repo that you want to build. And then the steps of the workflow consist of doing a checkout, building the code, and then running a couple of tests. These two tests, you can see it's an array in YAML, so they will be run in parallel. And it's going to run a unit test as well as a kind of an end-to-end test. The end-to-end test is going to actually spin up a InfluxDB instance that was built previously, and then run some requests against that instance. The other thing you'll notice is that between these steps, we're passing artifacts as arguments between the steps. So this first artifact, for example, is a code artifact, which was generated as an output from the checkout step, which is the previous step. The unit test step also takes the same artifact. The InfluxDB E2E test takes a slightly different artifact. It's basically the InfluxDB binary, which was generated as an artifact, as an output from the build step. So this is the kind of artifact management really makes it easy to kind of pass derived objects between steps, and does the naming everything for you and deletes any artifacts that are not necessary based on a schedule or once they're no longer needed. Let's take a little bit closer look at the build steps. This will give you an idea of how to write these kind of workflows top to bottom. So this build step takes as input the code artifact, which was generated by the checkout step in this case, and places that at the specified path. And then as output, it generates the InfluxDB object, which it finds at the go bin influx, the path. And you see that it's basically running just a Golang container and then running some commands to do the build. Okay. Let's take a look at the E2E test workflow as well, because this workflow shows how to use fixtures. So again, there's kind of a description section at the beginning, and then there's an input section where it's taking the InfluxDB object as the input. And then something new is defining a fixture, defining an InfluxDB fixture, which it will create by running this InfluxDB server template. In the steps portion, it's going to first run a step which initializes the InfluxDB, and then it's going to start up 3 producers in parallel, which would generate records in the InfluxDB. And you can see that it accesses the IP address of the InfluxDB as a parameter here, basically the IP address of the InfluxDB of this fixture, which we defined as here. So the IP address will be assigned automatically, and this is the way other steps will access this service. Once the data has been loaded into the InfluxDB, it will run a consumer step, which basically does some gets on the InfluxDB to get the data that was stored in the system. Okay, if we look at the InfluxDB server step itself, you see it's very simple. It basically takes one input, which is the binary, which was the InfluxDB binary, runs a standard Debian container, and then basically runs the InfluxDB service. So the YAML overall is very simple. So you see how it's structured. Okay, let's get to the exciting part. Let's submit this job. All right. We use the Argo CLI. Job submit, the name of the workflow we want to run. Okay, and then I'm going to specify the local. Like it tells it to use the template that's stored locally on my workspace other than one that's committed. It makes it very easy to modify your templates, play around with it, without having to constantly commit them and create kind of garbage in your GitHub repository. So as you are developing your templates, this is a very convenient feature. Okay, the job has been submitted. Let's list the jobs that are currently running. It's just that one job. Let's take a look at that job in a little more detail. Yeah, you can see that this is the workflow that we just saw. You can see it shows a tree-structured view of that job. And you can see that it's currently running the checkout step. So I do it again. It's still running the checkout step. Oh, the checkout step just finished, and then it's going to move now onto the other steps. But let's take a look at this job in the GUI. You can see kind of a graphical representation of this workflow. So this will basically just bring up the status of that particular job that we're running. And you can see that it's currently running the build step. You can look at the YAML if you like as well from here, and it shows the YAML corresponding to that particular step. This is a nested workflow, which we can expand, and we can take a look at that YAML as well. So it makes it very easy to kind of browse what's happening and what step in your code is actually being executed. Along the top here, you also see a few other tabs. So you can, for example, look at all the artifacts that are being generated and download these artifacts if you like. Sorry, a little switchy there. You could also look at all the logs that are being generated. So if anything goes wrong, go to the log file, see what happened. And there's also a job summary. And one of the interesting things we show in the job summary is actually how much it costs to run the workflow. So far, this job has cost about 0.05 cents to run. So very cheap to run a simple workflow. Let's go back to our CLI. Take a look at the job status one more time.
And Ed, you're nearing your demo period. Just wanted to let you know.
Okay, yes, I'm almost done. This is almost done. You can, so this was, in particular, was a CI workflow, but obviously you could run any kind of workflow. In particular, I'd like to run kind of like simulations if you have a lot of like parameters you want to run simulations on. Create a very simple workflow that runs it all in parallel, get it done really quickly. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Ed. Appreciate it. Next on the agenda, we have a 1.8 release update from Jace.
Hey, this is going to be a bit of a monologue because this is a lot of stuff to share. But as you know, we're getting into the home stretch of the release, which is planned for 9/27. And in the minutes for the meeting, you'll see what I'm going to go through here. So if I speak too fast, please follow along there just to help follow this discussion. So I linked in the agenda for the community meeting the burn down meeting minutes, and this is sort of the play-by-play of the release as it unfolds, and we try and stabilize the release branch and make sure it's as high quality as can be for delivery. Those meetings have been happening Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, starting last week and this week. And next week they will go to a daily cadence because we're going to be getting closer and closer to crunch time on the release. So in my update, you'll see we're still sorting out a lot of broken tests, especially upgrade tests. My commentary is this happens every release, and this needs to stop happening every release, and we will continue trying to make that happen or not happen, whichever of those seems like the right double negative. And feature tracking spreadsheet and features in the 1.8 milestone have diverged. What that means is that because the release team and specifically the product management team tracks the work in a spreadsheet that is more digestible, there is a divergence between what the record of note is. I've said before in the past, GitHub is always the record of note, but there are occasionally times where people will update a spreadsheet and not necessarily reflect that change in GitHub, and that seems to be what has happened this time. So we're taking this as a retro item, and we're going to work very hard to reconcile that for 1.9 and moving forward. There's no risk there necessarily to the release, other than that we're just trying to have full understanding of what is different between those two things. The next bullet point is major release themes are ceding to SIG themes. This is yet another aspect of ways in which 1.8 has been a surprising beast in its manifestation of code that doesn't necessarily have as much upper structure in the sense of release-wide themes as maybe prior releases has. I have my own thoughts about why that is, and we've talked about it in the burn down meetings. But I think that the nutshell is we're actually seeing the governance structure around SIGs coming home to roost. And what that means is that SIGs continue owning more code, continue owning more tests, clearly owning the process around the code they're delivering. So the idea of a centralized feature management process feels like it's a little out of sync with what's happening in this release. So that in some ways is good. I think that people who are contributing code and who are participating in SIG should have a direct feeling of tying their work to what those themes are that are being delivered. The not so good is that we didn't plan that. It just sort of happened. And this disparity between product management, planning, and top-level priorities is calling out that we don't know if this is necessarily a structure that makes sense. This is going to be a hot topic for SIG PM and also SIG architecture and also SIG release, because these program management type SIGs all have a lot of cross-cutting concerns, and we need to make sure that those are being spoken for, because the work of product management team is extremely important and is how a lot of great work gets done to share with the community what delivery or value we're delivering. So it doesn't in any way mean that SIG PM is not relevant. It just means that there's ways in which the work is being completed and managed that are diverging. There's also the fact that 1.8 was supposed to be a quote-unquote stabilization release and not feature focused, yet we are sitting at a backlog of 30 alpha features going into this, so it doesn't feel like we necessarily accomplished that goal per se. That said, I want to give my standard disclaimer and reassurance that this is very high quality code. There's nothing about it that needs stabilization. It's not an unstable release. It's simply, where are we focusing our efforts? Is it delivering mostly the elimination of tech debt, or is it delivering more alpha features and whatnot? So again, very high quality release. We're doing absolutely everything in our power to ensure that. but the raison d'etre of the release is not specifically to harden existing features and promote them up the chain from alpha to beta or beta to stable. Less good is that all this is happening late in the process, and that is unfortunately because we didn't have visibility of this sort of disparity until relatively recently, because the work to finalize what features are in flight and such, and also working on release notes draft, that's where all that stuff gets documented, and it's pretty late in the process for that. So as a release team, we have tried very hard to do late changes in this process. So what we're going to do is we're going to directly reach out to SIGs and solicit feedback on what SIG level prioritization was for the release. So in some cases, like for example, SIG Node, their release theme is actually more of a rationale for the SIG existing in the first place, which is providing really high quality, stable, extensible code at the node level, and less like specific features related to this release. Other SIGs certainly will have some themes, like SIG cluster cluster lifecycle will have some. So don't worry, there's nothing really concerning about this. It's the natural and healthy evolution of our processes, and thankfully we have a community and a bunch of governance around this that's emerging, that's helping guide this work, and I feel confident that we're going to deliver high quality release regardless. So before I move on, any questions about all that, because that was a lot? Okay, silence equals lazy consensus. Except Robert Bailey. What makes us believe that this is the case? Yes.
Yeah, I guess I was just curious. You say we think it's better for end users. Why do we think it's better for end users, and who are those end users, right? Do we expect end users are saying, I really care about a new networking feature, therefore it's better that the release notes are organized into networking being separate than storage? And that could totally be the case. But I would be surprised if end users want or should need to care about the substructure we've created within our project via SIGs.
I guess I have some thoughts on that. I think it's important to start educating the users of the project, so when they inevitably run into bugs and ask for feature requests, they know they have at least some idea in their head. And I don't think we would ever move away from having component-based release notes as well, but just a level like what the SIG does, what they're focused on. And I linked in the SIG node SIG level theme into cluster lifecycle Slack chat, just like a link to where that landing page is in the community repo, so they can start to build these mental models in their head. So they can start associating that the kubelet is owned by SIG node, or kubedm is owned by cluster lifecycle, same with kops. Just to help, because we're going to start breaking down the mono repo, and so people will definitely need a guide to help them. And so I think everything we do should reinforce the underlying structure of the project. And this is just one attempt of trying to do it, and we're going to try it. We'll see if it's useful for people. We'll see. But it's a good point.
Yeah, thanks, Caleb. That's spot on. Also, that what we didn't want to do was try and manufacture themes. Like look at this and try and figure out what those themes might have been. I think that's worse. The whole intent of release notes is really to serve people who are trying to evaluate Kubernetes as far as, do I want to upgrade to this version? Are there things that I need to know about this that are relevant to my use case? What is the impact? What are the things that I'm getting? So it's really less developer focused, and so it's a really interesting balance that we have there, right? What is the right level of detail? But I think the things like in networking, for example, CNI work is just absolutely, it's crossing release boundaries. It's huge. It's so important to the life cycle of Kubernetes as a whole. That in my opinion deserves to be called out. That's a big deal. And there are other SIGs with equal things in flight. So I think that it's really good to give those some airtime and not just be like, Kubernetes theme of stabilization or Kubernetes theme of security. Like, yeah, those are great, but what does that actually mean? So, any other questions? All right, moving hopefully rapidly along. There's a timeline in the Kubernetes community meeting notes. Basically, that links to the timeline for the release that we developed eons ago, which is varying levels of correct, but I share it because that is our playbook to date. The big things this week are that we are trying to do code unfreeze. That was supposed to happen yesterday, but we're doing it today, largely because we want to have the best signal we can out of tests, and specifically upgrade tests, and that was not happening. So we're working very hard to resolve flakes and get those tests giving solid signal. And so once that's good and in place, we will go ahead and cut the beta.1 and unfreeze the submit queue for things that do not have we'll unfreeze the submit queue in the sense that you won't have to have the 1.8 milestone anymore. You won't have to have the requirements in place for that. So 1.9 essentially will, the work on that will begin the moment that gets cut over. We're doing tech review on documents, and we're reviewing and triaging open issues. That open issue count is currently 70, which is a little concerning, but we're going to go through those and see what actually are release blocking. They are considered release blocking by default until they're either pulled out of the milestone or closed. So if you're a SIG with one of those issues, please put all hands on deck to resolve or pull those out of the milestone as soon as possible, because if the release timing slips, it will absolutely be as a result of this. And if it is a result of that, I'd like it to be because we're actually doing the right thing and fixing critical issues and having a high quality release, as opposed to just atrophy or maybe issues not getting terminated properly or resolved properly. There's more detail in this about the nuts and bolts about this week. Feel free to ask any questions in the SIG release channel if you have those. Next week, we'll have daily burn down meetings. We'll cut the 1.8 release canon on Wednesday, and my big ask there from the community is please start playing with that release. Put it through its paces. Do whatever you need to do, because that is a key indicator of release health, and we'll definitely need that as soon as possible. Other releases, 1.6 is out. 1.6.10 is out as well. I'm not sure if either of the release managers for those have any commentary. But if so, feel free to jump in.
Hi, this is Anthony. We're for 1.6.
Great, thanks, Anthony.
So for 1.6.10 is out, but I don't have anything particular to call out there, but I do want to take this chance to reiterate that there's an issue with stateful set. If you're starting on something lower than 1.7, you'll need to watch out for this if you're upgrading either to 1.7 or even to 1.8. This also applies. So please check out the release notes for 1.6.9. There's some links there to explain what the actions required are.
Okay, great. Got it, and I put it in the notes. Anything else release-wise? I don't know if Wojtek's here, but probably not, since it's late. Okay, great. Back to you, Paris.
Jeez, thank you so much. That was a great update. Who's on for SIG CLI?
Hi, this is Mengqi. I will give status update for 6 CLI. Can you see? Okay. So first is the kube control plugin. It is alpha in 1.8 and plan to be beta in 1.9, and document already. And the next is to move kubectl to its own repo. So it has two steps. First, eliminate bad dependencies. It's work in progress. And the second step is figure out how we can test it and how to release it after move it out. So for the first step, so we need to break back bad dependency, including not depend on the internal tabs, and also move some shared utility to repo, which is Kubernetes utils and Kubernetes common. The util repo has been set up, but the common repo is not yet planned to be set up at the beginning of Q4. And next is exploring Brian's declarative application management approach. It's basically have a base layer at the bottom, and then you can apply multiple overlay on top of it. And this new application management approach will be under kubectl alpha command. After prototyping it and it's ready, it will be under kubectl alpha command. And next is we are refactoring kubectl apply code base and also the underlying strategic merge patch to use visitor pattern, which will be easier to extend it in the future. To, for example, if we want to add some new patch strategy, it will be much easier. Currently, the code base for this is really hard to maintain and extend. And then re-architecturing the apply logic. So the current workflow in apply is first do a get and then calculate the diff and then send the patch. The new approach is do a get and calculate the diff and apply the patch locally and then do a put. So the proposal is here. So the reason why we want to do this is we try to eliminate the version scale issue in kubectl apply. Yes, that's all. Any questions?
Monkey, I'm sorry, did you say you were done?
Oh, yes.
Oh, I apologize. The computer skipped a little bit. All right, well, next up is Jace again with a SIG architecture update.
I would totally make Brian do this, but he's got a cold and he can't. So as a dutiful SIG person, we're giving our update quarterly here, which is basically that I've got a link to our meeting minutes and recordings. Our meeting time is 60 minutes and links every Thursday. It happens at 8:30 in the morning Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern, and 1700 UTC. We have an alternating schedule of office hours on 1 week and the full meetings on the other. This week constituted a full meeting. Next week will be office hours. Just a quick bit about office hours. We use that time to discuss. That's not a time where we would typically make decisions or have procedural related things happen. It's really about if people have architecture questions that they need answered, or they just wanted to run things by the group or the SIG leaders or SIG lead, just generally speaking, that's the time to do it. It also is sometimes where we'll organize the backlog of things that we need to bring to the next meeting. There is a architectural backlog in GitHub, and there's a link to that in the meeting minutes. Right now, our strategy, since we're relatively new SIG, is to get processes in place, and then we want to run proposals through it to validate our approach. The processes are mainly related to how do we review proposals, how do we take in those things and get commentary, set timelines on ratifying or asking for more questions, or how do we handle the entire life cycle of a proposal. And once that's in place, then we're going to go back and retroactively look at the proposals and make sure that they have the metadata that we need encapsulated in those. And the metadata proposal is out in that the meeting minutes as well. And we're working on finalizing the SIG proposal directory structure by tomorrow, Friday the 15th. And essentially that is, there's the version there actually is in flight. So there's a few things in there, bugs that Brian's going to be working on today and tomorrow. But essentially trying to make sure that proposals have a home in each SIG. And that allows us to make sure that we know who to contact for the evolving architecture there. And again, so ownership is clear. There's also a proposal in process. It's community pull request 967. And that is related to how we handle RFCs as a community. So hopefully we'll get some good feedback on that and close that out by the 29th of this month. That's being driven largely by Caleb. And yeah, if you have questions about any of this, hit me or Brian up and we'll be more than happy to help. There's also the SIG Architecture Slack channel and the SIG Architecture mailing list. Any questions about that? Okay, great. Back to you, Paris.
All right, we are on the announcement section now, and George is going to give us an update on the election, and I'll help fill in some gaps. George?
Okay, so voter registration closed yesterday. So everyone who's either applied for membership status, you should have gotten an email with the confirmation of your status. And if you see the second link there on the notes, Paris has put together a voter guide that has a list of all the important dates, including when the election is going to start, what address you're going to get the email from, which is a cs.cornell.edu email address, so you might have to whitelist that, so expect something from that address. The election will start on September 19th, and then it'll go for 2 weeks and end on October 3rd, and then we'll announce the results at this meeting here on October 5th. So those are the important dates. If you scroll through the voting document, it's got a list of who's running, and over time, candidates are going to be submitting their little platform pages so you can kind of get to know them a little bit better and know why they're running. And anything that you need will be put in this voter guide, including at the very bottom, a link to the email address of the current Bootstrap committee. If you have any questions, concerns, or anything like that, feel free to ping us on Slack or via email. Thank you.
Yeah, the voter's guide is a live doc, so we will be updating it as we continue on through the election cycle. Also, if you do not see a candidate linked to their bio right now, don't fret, just come back and it'll be linked. I think that's it for the election update. Thanks, George. And I just had one more update. We are talking to an organization called outreachy.org. Oh, why am I echoing? Hold on one second.
You hear me?
Yeah, no, hold on one second. I've got a terrible echo. Don't move. Okay, all right. We are going to start engaging with an organization called outreachy.org. This may have already happened in the past with certain individuals / SIGs. Get acquainted with this site. This is a fully funded stipend internship for underrepresented folks in tech. It acts like an internship, but they help us contribute. the docs team is now putting together a project proposal. So if anybody on here is interested in mentoring anyone that would be an underrepresented individual in tech, please get in contact with me. Excuse me, the outreachy.org information is going to be in the notes section as well. But this is not a call to action. This is just a call to see if you're interested. But reach out to me individually, either Slack or I'll put my my Google email address on the docs as well. But anyone else have any other quick announcements? Oh, actually, no, I'm sorry. We have an election question.
Yeah, election question. If you feel that you should have gotten one of those emails but you didn't, what should you do?
Feel free to ping me directly and I'll on Slack, and
Okay.
I'll look on the list and see what happened there.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else have any last minute election questions or anything like that? I know that's pretty important. Rock the boat. All right. Any last minute announcements? Same time next week? All right. I think we're done here. Have a great day, everybody.